Hello, my name is Michael Jones and I'm here to present to you the first part of a two-part episode of the World Ranking International Football podcast, where myself and journalist and author Sha Nen will preview all 24 teams ahead of the 2023 AFC Asian Cup, which begins on Friday, January the 12th, 2024. The episode will also feature a very special interview with Hong Kong centre-back Sean Say, whose team will be participating against Iran, United Arab Emirates and Palestine in Group C. If you enjoy what you hear, please follow us on our socials. We're on X, TikTok and YouTube at World Ranking Pod and on Instagram at World_Ranking Pod. But for now, please sit back, keep working, driving, commuting, running or whatever else you do when you tune into a podcast and enjoy. Thank you very much for joining me, Sha Nen. You're a football writer who covers a lot of Australian football, but also a lot of football across Asia. Would you just be able to introduce yourself to us and the listener and tell me a little bit about an exciting project you're working on at the moment?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's a real honor. My name's Sha Nen. Many of you outside India and Australia probably would have no idea who I am. I write about Australian football. I've also worked for the Indian Super League, so you might have seen me on their broadcast there, the Sri Lankan national team and the AFC. And I have a book out this year about the A-League's 20th anniversary. So yeah, pretty much anything to do with Australian football, that's me. So I'll try not to be so biased on Australia this episode, but no promises.
I'm excited to hear your thoughts on Australia, but obviously one of the reasons we've got you on is because you are comfortable talking and you're well researched in all the teams across Asia, really. So we'll make a start on Group A. Now, Group A is a group defined by managerial uncertainty and change in the last month, starting with Qatar. Now, what on earth has happened with Carlos Queiroz? I'm sure people will know about Carlos Queiroz. He managed Iran at the last World Cup. He's managed Portugal before, Real Madrid 20 years ago, actually, to this season, when he managed like Zidane, Beckham in his first season. Anyone who's watched that documentary will know Queiroz worked with Beckham at Manchester United before as well. And yeah, it seemed like a good match when he took on the Qatar role. He's recently left the post. It was, I believe, a mutual agreement, and he's been replaced by Tintin Marquez, who has managed in Qatar for a number of years now. What on earth has happened? Why has Queiroz left before one of the tournaments that you would suspect would have defined his tenure?
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting one with Qatar because they've had this bulk of the squad together for a number of years and they've had the investment, they've had the success. They won the Asian Cup last time around, and they didn't just win it with luck. They absolutely dominated the competition, and they had a good mixture of youth and experience coming through. So, for example, when it comes to the World Cup in 2022 on home soil, I know a lot of people outside Asia might have been thinking, "Oh, Qatar, what are they going to do? That's going to be a bit of a joke." But for me, I thought they were going to do really well, and I was really expecting them to do well considering how good they played at the Asian Cup. And for whatever reasons unknown, I'd be a very rich man if I knew what went wrong. It just all has started to fall apart, and all this good foundation and this good, football that was being built seems to have just vanished. And it's the real mystery of Qatar football. And I think they've done really well to hire Marquez because he's a coach who's managed in the local league. He knows the players, he knows what to expect, and he knows the environment well. And he might not be a household name outside of Asia, but he's the type of manager they need to just get these players together and get them on board. So, yeah, very interesting times for Qatar football at the moment.
It really is. And you do wonder with Tintin Marquez whether they've tried to follow the footsteps in what they had previously when they had another Spanish and Catalan boss in Felipe Sanchez. They will be hindered by the absence of Mohamed Montari. You mentioned also the 2022 World Cup. He scored Qatar's only goal there, the Ghana-born forward. That's a big loss for them. But they will certainly be expecting to progress from a group, which also contains another relative powerhouse in Asia, although not with the same recent success by any means, in China. China announced their final squad on the 12th of December, which seems a long time ago if you compare it to other squads, which have kind of been trickling through over the past week or two. What can we expect from them? They've not had the best year in terms of form. They've got a couple of players of note to English-speaking listeners, maybe. Wule, we mentioned Espanyol. He was playing for them. I actually saw him in action when they played my team Wolves in the Europa League a few years ago, and Tyus Browning as well, who used to play for Everton under Roberto Martinez. But yeah, what do we know about this China team, and will they be expected to progress from Group A?
It's interesting with the Chinese team because they're one of only a few teams that have no foreign players in their squad. Every single player in the China squad's playing locally. And a guy like Tyus Browning, who English people might know, is actually known as Jiang Guangtai in China. He's done really, really well for himself since he's come in the national team. And he's one of the real leaders in their team. But the problem with Chinese football is they've had this bulk of the squad together for a number of years. And when all these seasoned veterans started to retire, they didn't really have players to get the experience to replace them. So they were losing a couple of hundred caps worth of players, and they haven't brought in the players to replace them. And a guy like Wu Lei, he's in his 30s now. It's the same issue. They don't really have anyone coming through to replace him that's young. Their youngest striker's 27. I don't expect them to progress from the group, and I don't expect them, honestly. I'd be surprised if they don't even qualify for the next Asian Cup, because Chinese football has kind of stagnated and it's had an issue with rejuvenation in the past few years. And no one seems to be brave enough to blood these young players, which is such a shame for Chinese football.
I guess just before moving on, that's such an interesting point, and like you said, it's a bold prediction about China. Why do you think that is? Is it a lack of funding? Is there a lack of incentive for young players to be played? What's going on in that sense? Because obviously it wasn't that long ago where you got the impression that Chinese football was really going to be on the up, and they've become a bit of a powerhouse, if not just in Asia, but across world football.
When Chinese football invested all this money into bringing these big name players like Hulk and Oscar over, the talk was about China winning the World Cup by 2050 and them developing all these youth systems and these youth pathways and everything. But in a way, guys like Oscar and Hulk and all these big foreign players have kind of hamstrung their progress with promoting youth players locally, because you're not going to play a 17 or an 18-year-old over someone who you're paying $60 million a year for, even if they're performing well. So it's kind of hurt them long term, because a lot of these young players who would have got opportunities at local level just simply didn't due to the foreign players, which is such a shame. And it's kind of ironic if you want to think about it that way.
It really is, and you wonder if a poor showing in this tournament, for example, could be a bit of a wake-up call. Now, one of the teams that they will be coming up against, and one of the teams that certainly may fancy themselves coming into the tournament on much better form, is Tajikistan. They are managed by a Croatian manager, Petar Segat, and they have won 4 of their last 5 games, albeit only 3 of them have been competitive, and one of those was a draw against Jordan. Now, you talked about sort of a lack of a focus on young players in China. Tajikistan's a bit of an interesting case because they've got a couple of higher profile players, Khosrow Tworov, who is on the books at Shakhtar Donetsk, and Murad Ali at Knazarov. Both of these players have been omitted from the squad, but I think it would be unfair to accuse Sega of not putting trust or faith in young players, because over half their squad is under the age of 26, whereas I think that's the case for about 6 Chinese players. Do we know anything about why those players were omitted, and what kind of threat did Tajikistan, as a relative unknown outside of the realms of Asian football, bring to this tournament?
It's such a shame in world football that Asian football isn't seen as a competition to take seriously. I don't know if you watch many press conferences in the Premier League, for example, but Ange Postecoglou, Aussie manager, had to face a few questions about guys like Son leaving for international duty and whether or not he was happy about that. And that's the case with these Tajikistan players. Often clubs aren't happy about letting their players go for a tournament that they see. It's a shame when we get good players who can make a difference to these national teams not being released by their clubs to play in a tournament. It might not mean much to Europe, but it means a hell of a lot to Asia. You're right, in terms of Tajikistan, they've got a really young squad and they don't just have young players for the sake of young players. They've got a lot of talent in them. Sharom Semiev is such a good, talented player. He's playing in Moldova, I believe, and he's only 22. He's a forward for the future, but all these local players in Tajikistan, there's not one I would say that is a bad player. I don't think the Tajikistan league, is one in Asian competition, in Asian club competition, that's kind of shocked a few people for a number of years about how good they've been when they've rocked up against nations and clubs that people have thought they're easily going to waltz these guys. They've either won the match or put in a good showing. And I think out of all the Asian clubs, aside from maybe one, which I'll get to later on, they're probably my dark horses to make it out of the group and put in a good showing, because there's just talent all throughout and the young players, which is going to build on for the future.
It is quite a bold prediction, but I guess the risk does come with young players as to whether they can manage those kind of expectations or excitement on the big stage. And this will be the first real test for so many of those players, but it'll be fascinating to see how they get on, like you said. And talking about Group A, so we've got Qatar, China, Tajikistan, and the final team is Lebanon. This was a group defined by managerial uncertainty. And if you think the Qatar situation's a bit crazy, I'd love to introduce Lebanon to you. So Lebanon have rehired, again within the past month, Montenegrin coach Miodrag Radulović, who I will come on to in a second, and I'm sure you will speak about a bit as well. Now, when I decided to run this podcast, one of the first people I got in touch with was the Lebanon coach at the end of November, Nikola Jurcevic, who was then Lebanon manager. He was in the post for 67 days, another Croatian boss like Peter Sagan. And I messaged him a week before, I think he left on the 8th of December, and he wasn't prepared to come on. Well, he'd actually asked me to go through the press office, in fairness to him. I'm hoping that he will be able to come on in the near future. It'd be fantastic to hear from him. But do we know much about what's happened there? And Radulović getting an old manager back in can sometimes seem like a desperate move, but he had huge success in relative terms for Lebanon, didn't he? Albeit he's got a much different challenge this time.
For Lebanese football, no disrespect, even getting any sort of result, whether or not it's a draw in this tournament, is a massive challenge for them. So this is a team that you'd expect more often than not, even in their previous match. They only lost 1-0 to Saudi Arabia. For me, that's a really good showing. That's a positive showing. He's a manager who, I agree, it may seem desperate to bring him back, but bringing him back has been a good move because he can get the best out of these players and he can make these players get to another level. I think it was probably a mistake to let him go in the first place, and bringing him back is probably the only thing that's made Lebanon stand any chance of getting out of the group, if I'm honest, because he's a manager who's just brilliant in my eyes.
They've been mired by what is obviously a very unstable economic situation over the past few years and political situation. So I think for them to be appearing in the tournament in its own right is fantastic. And it was only in 2019, in the last Asian Cup even, when they made their first appearance. So for them to be back in the tournament and for them to even get a point or something, as you said, would be a fantastic achievement. Now, we're going to move on to Group B, to the group I suspect, Sha Nen, that you are most excited for, because we start with nobody less than Australia. And I find the Australia situation really interesting. I was really impressed with them in Qatar when they made it through the group to face Argentina. And what interests me even more is that Graham Arnold, who's still in the post and despite being linked with jobs in Europe as well as elsewhere, he's gone with a squad where half the players have less than 10 appearances for the country. So would you just be able to tell me a little bit about this next wave of Australian talent, Graham Arnold's project here and what the expectations are in Australia?
Well, when the Australia squad was announced, the first thing Graham Arnold said to the press was he's got one eye on the Asian Cup and he's got two eyes on the upcoming World Cup. And there was a big omission from the Australia squad, which was Jamie McLaren. He's a forward who, yes, he hasn't had tremendous success in the national team colours, but he is the leading goal scorer in the A-League. He's got 153 goals in about 200 games in the local competition. Fantastic striker, but unfortunately, he just doesn't fit the Australian system. So he's brought in a couple of good young guys. And you're right, there's a lot of inexperience in this squad, but a lot of these boys who have come into the Australian squad who have, as you said, under 10 games experience, they've all come through the ranks together. They've all played at the Olympic level. They've all played at the under 20s level, under 18 level, in the A-League academies. So they're very experienced playing together. And a lot of these boys have also played together in the A-League, but at least 95% of the players in the Socceroos squad have come through the A-League at some point in time.
On that, do you think that bodes well for the national team? And before I let you answer that, I mean, there's a couple of players I know have been kind of tearing up the English Football League this season in Cameron Burgess, just 3 caps, but 28 years of age, and Cassini Yengi for Portsmouth in League One. But then there's other players. I know you did an interview with John Iredale, who plays in Germany, and Graham Arnold has an impressive assistant. There's a bit of a theme with old Alex Ferguson assistant managers at this tournament in René Meulenstein too.
Oh, 100%. John Iredale, for example, good friend of mine, tremendous bloke. Really love the guy. He's not played for the Socceroos yet. He will make his debut probably on the weekend. But coming into the Australia squad, he's played with Graham Arnold at Sydney FC. He was in the youth team at Sydney FC when Graham Arnold was there. He's played with a number of these guys at Olympic level, at youth level. So for a new player coming into a national team squad, often the case is that you don't know anyone. But with John, he knows everyone very, very well. So it's a comfortable transition for all these young players to come in rather than making it daunting. And you've already got that rapport with the players if you played with them at club level. So it makes it so any player who's good enough to represent the national team can not only come in and feel comfortable, but they can also slot in. They also know the way Australia plays, because Graham Arnold's also the coach at youth level and Olympic level. So he plays the same style of football. Anyone who's good enough can just come in, slot right in, and they know the type of football we expect and the type of football we have to play. There's absolutely no period of uncertainty. People just automatically know what they're going to do, which bodes very well for the future.
Well, I'm really excited to see how they get on, even if Arnold's kind of gone out and said that this isn't the immediate priority. But in a way, even if it could be, it sounds quite a clever way of taking a bit of pressure off another team that's quite inexperienced compared to some of the other teams at this tournament who'll have more players who have competed at a tournament before. So I'm going to move to the second team in Group B now, which is a team I think could really give Australia a good challenge. That is Uzbekistan. Now, Uzbekistan's standout player is their captain and striker, Eldor Shomurodov. What I can see is that he withdrew from the squad.
It's just a shame because he's got a lot of experience, he's got a lot of goals, and without question, he's Uzbekistan's standout and star player. And honestly, without him, I don't know how they're going to go progressing through the group, because you can't just take out a player of that immense quality. To be honest, he's probably one of the best players in Asia at the moment, and just to have him missing from the tournament is just such a shame.
I think it's such a shame. I've watched him quite a bit in Serie A, and he's got such a unique skill set for strikers that I'm aware of at the level for which he possesses in this tournament. They will be confident with the manager, Sretko Katanec. He's got extensive experience across major tournaments. He's got extensive experience managing in Asia. He managed Iraq for 3 years before Uzbekistan. He's in his 3rd year with them now. He's managed UAE for 3 years, Olympiacos at club level. But he also managed Slovenia. He led them to their first World Cup in 2002 before quite a high profile fallout with Zlatko Zahovic overshadowed that sadly for them. But then he had a second stint with them between 2013 and 2017 as well. So he's got a big job on his hands without his star man, but they have got other players Abdelkader Husanov at Lens in France. Is only 19 years old, the defender, but he's already broken through for the first team in Ligue 1, whereas some of the other players who are a part of these big European teams haven't made that step just yet. So there is some hope for them, but we'll move on to our third team in Group C, which is Syria, another team with high-profile manager, albeit another high-profile manager apart from times from the noughties, Hector Cooper. He was the Inter Milan manager from 2001 to 2003, but maybe more famously, he led Valencia to a Champions League final, where he actually led them to a Champions League final twice. He's found himself more on the international scene since. He was manager of Egypt from 2015 to 2018, then Uzbekistan, coincidentally, for a year after that, DR Congo from 2021 to 2022, before making a move back to Asia, where he's taking a Syria job. And we talk about big striking absences. And there is some really interesting Syrian players, got a really fascinating diaspora, but we talk about big striking absences in a group that could have been defined by these star strikers and star striker matchups. Where on earth is Omar Al Somah, the striker who almost took Syria to a World Cup?
Honestly, I was at the game where he almost took Syria to a World Cup. He hit the post from a free kick. That was how close he was to sending them to a World Cup instead of Australia. And it's just such a shame that I know he's in his mid-30s now, but he's one of the best strikers Asia's ever seen, particularly in the 2000s. And it's such a shame that he didn't just stick it out for another year or two before retiring from the national team, because what a massive absence. I know they've got a few good forwards on their books, particularly Krubin, but Al Somah is just a player that, for a defender, he would be an absolute nightmare. He's tall, he's quick, he's good aerially, he's good on the ground, and just for them to lose him right before the Asian Cup, massive, massive blow.
It really is, yeah. Omar Krubin plays in UAE for Al Wada, and he will be expected to carry quite a bit of the burden, attacking burden for Syria, I would think. But they will be boosted at least by Uzbekistan's kind of similar situation. Now, the other team is another team that will have huge interest going into the tournament. Whether expectations will match is another question, which I'll allow you to answer, Sha Nen, which is India. But one of the nice things about India being here, we talk about themes in groups and we look at this managerial uncertainty in Group A. Group B is arguably defined by the absence of star strikers or big name strikers. McLaren for Australia, albeit in slightly different circumstances. Shomurodov for Uzbekistan, Al Somah for Syria. But Sunil Chhetri, okay, he's 39 years old, but 145 caps, 93 goals. He plays for Bengaluru in India. He is a living legend of the game. Would you just be able to tell me a bit about whether this will be his last tournament, his last real international outing, and the impact this man has had on football in the country?
I would be surprised if he doesn't retire straight at the end of it. Even in his club football in the ISL, he's often played a bit of a limited role off the bench, but he's still brought in quality, and the impact he's had is absolutely massive. I mean, yeah, he was no David Beckham, and obviously India is a lot like Australia in terms of their football culture, where football's not the most popular sport. They're competing with cricket. Cricket's night and day ahead of everyone else, and Chetri's almost been that superstar of Indian football. He went to Sporting in Portugal, and while it was only the second team, that was such a massive move for Indian football to have someone playing overseas in Europe in a good level. And he's not only this generation, but even the generation before. He's pretty much been like the father figure of the squad. He's led a lot of these players through the national team, their whole careers right from the start. And there's players who have come and gone and retired, and he's still going. So if he does retire, I don't know how they're going to fill that hole, because he's just, well, I think of the Indian national team, it's just Chhetri. He's done so much on and off the field for Indian football, and without a doubt, he's the biggest legend they've ever seen. And also, Gurpreet Singh, and this also talks about him retiring, their goalkeeper. That would be another massive loss, because not only is he a big talent, but he's got, almost 70 games experience, which if these two retire at the end of the tournament, I don't know how India's going to fill that massive void.
He is Chetri's club mate as well. So it would be a big blow for Bengaluru. I'd just say quickly before moving on as well, Igor Stimac, another Croatian manager, he's under a bit of pressure because they haven't been in great form. And will Stimac be expected to do anything here, or is it a bit of a free hit despite India's form?
I'm probably going to be a little bit harsh on Stimac. I'm surprised he still has the role for a number of years, pretty much his whole tenure in terms of being manager of the Indian national team. There's been nothing but criticism for him. There's been nothing but calls for him to get him out of the Indian national team. If you go on Twitter after an Indian national team match, even if it's a win, the fans are absolutely not happy. And I'm going to be brutally honest, I don't blame them. He's got such a good squad. And even against opposition, no disrespect that India should be beating, he's not able to beat them. I don't think he has the tactical skills, particularly with the skill set of a player like Chhetri, to use him properly. He has one of the best midfielders in Asia, Thapa, the number 7 for India. He doesn't know how to utilize him properly. He really struggles. He has plan A, and then if plan A doesn't work, he doesn't know what to do. So India is one of those teams that I feel if they go down a goal in the tournament to any side, it's pretty much game over for them because he's a manager who just doesn't seem to know what to do as soon as things get a little bit difficult. And I think the results have sort of shown that. I think in 2023, he turned it around a little bit with some good wins, particularly against Kyrgyzstan. But there's been a lot of incidences over the past 2 years where it's just not gone right for India, and particularly their last match, which was all the way in November, was such a poor showing for India. They only got beat 3-0 by Qatar, but they did not look in the game at all. They did not look like they were ever going to score a goal. And tactically, if you're playing with a squad and you don't look likely to score a goal at all, that's a very worrying sign for me. And that's very disappointing for Indian football because it's come such a long way in terms of club football, and they just can't make that transition in national football.
So moving on to Group C, starting with the big hitters, Iran, they flattered to deceive in the opening group game of the 2022 World Cup against England, which I was very happy about, narrowly missed out on the knockouts afterwards. Would you be able to tell me where their standing is in Asia coming into this tournament? And is it a similar team to what we saw in Qatar?
Without question, Iran for a number of years have been, in my opinion, the best team in Asia. But unfortunately, when it comes to that big stage, they're just unable to get the job done in these big matches, not just in the World Cup, but also in Asian Cups, which is such a shame because they've probably got the most talent all round out of any squads in Asia, and they always perform really well. But for whatever reason, just when it comes to a big do or die match, they haven't been able to overcome that. And yes, it is. They've had a lot of the good core of the squad together for a number of years. And that's the thing with Iranian football. They've been building this good, strong core for a number of years. And these players are all quality. There's not one player, not even their reserve players, that probably wouldn't walk into the starting 11 of any team in Asia. So without a doubt, in my eyes, they're the favourites to win the competition.
I'm even more excited to see how Iran get on now. But yeah, they're blessed with huge attacking talent that will be representing them at the tournament as well. Mehdi Taremi, player I'm sure people are very familiar with. He plays for FC Porto in Portugal. He's their leading marksman as well. He scored 41 goals at national level. And then the guy with even more goals is the Roma striker, albeit not as integral to the Roma side, Sada Azmoun, but he's played for Bayer Leverkusen, whereas a star striker for Zenit St. Petersburg a few years ago as well. And Saman Ghoddos, a Premier League player for Brentford, scored an absolute screamer in the Premier League earlier this season as well. I think that was against Luton off the top of my memory. But they will be coming up against United Arab Emirates. Now, their coaching situation I find really interesting. They've got Paulo Bento, who was once the South Korean manager. He led them to the knockouts in the 2022 World Cup. He's also managed Portugal. He's led Portugal to knockouts in major tournaments in Euro 2012 as well. They've got their captain and star forward Ali Mabkout who has scored 84 goals, and Fabio Lima, who's also got 10 goals. Aside from Iran, will UAE be big hitters not just in the group, but in the tournament also?
UAE are always a side that I feel are underrated by many in Asia because they're one of the best sides in Asia. And you just mentioned Fabio Lima. He's a player who he come to Al Wasl in the UAE league probably about 10 years ago now. He's a naturalized Brazilian player, so that's why he's only played 24 times for the UAE, but he's already scored 10 goals. And put him up front with Ali Mabkout, who's just, he could score goals in his sleep. They're going to be a very dangerous attacking side. They're going to be a side that I don't think anyone would want to come up against. And I think a lot of sides like Australia, Japan, South Korea are hoping that they can somehow get knocked out of the group because if UAE comes up against any of these big nations in the knockout tournament, I can't see them not going out without a decent fight. They're a fantastic side and they're a side that people shouldn't take lightly. Aside from the big five, they're probably the best side in the tournament.
Given what you said about Qatar's level of performances at the last Asian Cup, you wonder if they will take inspiration from their campaign, even if maybe not be the country they'll want to take too much inspiration from. Now, the third team in the group is Hong Kong, and it's amazing that Hong Kong have qualified. Now, they are managed by a Norwegian, Jorn Andersen. Now, Jorn Andersen is a fascinating managerial character, partially just because of his CV alone. Now, anybody who knows Mainz in Germany will know that they were infamous for being the breeding ground for Jürgen Klopp and Thomas Tuchel. Jorn Andersen was the manager who had a year in charge between the two of them. And safe to say, he's not had the same success as Tuchel or Klopp, but he has been achieving quite impressive things with Hong Kong. Got a famous win, albeit in a friendly, just before this tournament, a matter of days ago over China, 2-1. They won't be expected to do much, will they, Sha Nen? But there is at least cause for optimism.
I think a lot of people, probably even a lot of people in Australia, are looking at Hong Kong and they're probably thinking they're a side that's there to make up the numbers. But as we saw with that victory against China, which was a brilliant result, any team in this Asian Cup certainly isn't there to make up the numbers. Even the teams that are lesser known, lesser rated, like Hong Kong, can really do some damage. And they could be one of those sides I mentioned about a lot of teams hoping the UAE wouldn't get out of the group. They could be a side that can be a real banana skin for a side like the UAE.
They really could be.
And I think that leads us on nicely into our interview with Hong Kong centre-back Shaun Tse. Shaun has had a magnificent story so far, far removed from the glitz and glamour you normally associate with former Manchester City players, where he was on the books there and at Manchester United, staying at City until being released at the age of 19. From then, he spent years playing in Hong Kong for numerous teams before returning to non-league football in England, where he plays for Radcliffe FC in Greater Manchester, who are the league leaders in the Northern Premier League, the 7th tier of English football. Here's the interview with Shaun, and I really hope that you enjoy it as much as I did.
Hi, Shaun. Thank you very much for joining me. I think it's fair to say you've taken the long route round to playing for Hong Kong, having first trained with them 10 years ago, is it? And shortly after your departure from Manchester City until making your debut in 2022. Now you're presenting your country at the Asian Cup. So huge congratulations. And how much pride have you taken from this?
Massively. I think obviously for us, it's probably the biggest achievement for us to play in this massive tournament, especially last time was like 54 years ago or something. Last time we qualified for this tournament. So yeah, like you said, it's been a long road. It's been something I've been looking forward to play for Hong Kong, and then obviously to play the qualifiers in June and actually qualify was not really expected, to be honest. It was a massive surprise, and now just to be here now, I'm just taking everything in.
And before we kind of get on to the qualifiers a bit more, how's that journey been for you in the national team?
My first really involvement was last year in the qualifiers in India. I think we had India, Cambodia, and Afghanistan in our group, so we managed to get through that. I think we played a couple of friendlies after that while I was still in Hong Kong, going to Japan, playing like the likes of Japan, Korea, China, and then a couple more friendly games. And I actually ended up moving back to the UK in September, basically stopped playing football for a while, only to join up again in pre-season back in the UK. And I've kind of been in touch, in and out of touch with the Hong Kong coach, and he recently got in touch with me again. With it leading up to this tournament now, and he basically said like he'd like for me to come and be a part of the team. So obviously it wasn't an opportunity that I could miss. So yeah, I'm just happy to be here now.
Well, it sounds like you've really earned your way into the manager's plans, and Jorn Andersen has been somewhat successful with Hong Kong as well. How has he been to work with on a personal and tactical level? Yeah,
honestly, I can't fault him. I've got nothing bad to say. I never really got to work with the other Hong Kong coaches before when I was in Hong Kong, but I know they was a lot more defensive. Anderson's come in and basically he's just changed the whole dynamic of the team. He's given everyone so much confidence. He's made the team a lot more attacking and rather than just defensive, just sitting back, trying to basically get what we can from the game. So yeah, he's changed everything really, and he's given everyone so much confidence to go out there, play, and just enjoy themselves really. Yeah.
Even in the group stages of the Asian Cup, you'll be facing some of Asia's most potent attackers in Ali Taremi, Sardar Azmoun, and Ali Mabkou. Without divulging all of your tactical plans, what's preparations been like in Qatar so far, and have you been working in particular to deal with those kind of elite level strikers?
Well, yeah, we've obviously been working on a lot of tactics, but it's at the end of the day, it's football. Anything can happen, and hopefully, something can happen for us. Hopefully, we can get something out of these games. We know it's going to be a massive ask. Obviously, like you said, the players that we're going to come up against and the teams we've got in our group, it's obviously going to be so difficult. But yeah, we've got our tactics, and hopefully we can get something out of it.
I think you've got this amazing story from what I've seen online, at least, where in recent times as well, you've been balancing football with your pressure washing business, if I'm right in saying, across Greater Manchester.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
How has that been for you? And I guess on a bigger picture as well, how's international football impacted your career?
Yeah, like I said, I moved back to the UK last September. Obviously, it wasn't really in my plans, but I was away after COVID. I was away from my wife and son. They actually ended up staying in the UK while I was back in Hong Kong, and I think I was away for them for 14 months straight. That just obviously didn't work out. So yeah, it was just basically time for me to move back to the UK. And then, like I said, I stopped playing football for a while just to be with the family, basically. And then obviously I wanted to get back into it, but I needed to work as well, with obviously being only semi-professional. So yeah, I started the pressure washing business. And I've actually I took to it quite well actually. Like I didn't really struggle with me not playing football anymore or not knowing what was going to happen. I kind of enjoyed doing something new, which is I don't know if it's strange or not, but I actually really enjoy it, doing the football and working on the side at the moment. So yeah, it's just obviously from going to that to then being called back up to the national team. It was a bit of a surprise really. So like I said, I'm just taking it in every day and just basically cherishing every moment in there at the moment. Yeah.
I guess not just for your wife and son, but for your family, it must be such a proud moment, especially in a way where you've been able to balance those priorities of family and football and get them together in the same place, in a really good place.
Yeah, it's funny because with me and my wife, we always laugh about it when I was like a full-time professional in Hong Kong, and my son, he obviously was a lot younger. I think he was like 3 or 4 back then. So he never cared like I was the football player or anything. No, he didn't really understand. And now he's 8 now, and obviously he's in primary school with all his friends, and he still tells everyone like now he understands it, and he's playing football now himself. Like he still tells everyone like, oh, my dad's a professional footballer, and I'm like, oh, I'm not really a professional footballer anymore, but like you can see how proud he is now. So obviously it's just really nice to see that, and it's nice for him to see me with the national team. Yeah, it's a big achievement, and yeah, something he really loves as well, which it makes me happy and proud.
Oh, that's lovely. What's Hong Kong's ambitions for this tournament?
Obviously, the big ambition would be to get through to the next round. We obviously know that's a massive task, but like I said before, it's football. You never know what can happen. So hopefully we can we can find some luck. And I believe we are a relatively small team in the tournament, so hopefully it can be like an underdog story. But I think it's something that we can do if we give it everything like we have done before. So we're all looking forward to it. It's a massive like step up for everyone here. Yeah, it's just something we need to go out there, enjoy, and just do our best.
Absolutely, best of luck, and yeah, we'll be following Hong Kong really closely. Thank you, Sean. The final team in the group got teams that have been impacted by natural disasters, economic situations. Palestine are the final team in this group, and I think it goes without saying that it's incredible that they're even going to be playing in this tournament. And for that, I'm sure there'll be a team that people wish well. They recently announced their final squad. They've got the Tunisian manager Makram Daboub, who has had a rather successful period over a couple of years in charge of the national team. And they've been really boosted by Ode Daberg from Charleroi in Belgium, who is their number 11 forward, who is absolutely critical for the way they play. I think it's almost unfair to put pressure on them and for there to be an expectancy on what can be achieved given that the situations in which they have to train, travel for a tournament like this. But looking at that football team, they're no minnows by any means, or in fact, they're certainly not the team that they were 10 or 20 years ago. They've grown exponentially as a football team and country.
I mentioned earlier in the podcast about Tajikistan that they're not my only dark horses, and I did say I was going to bring up another squad later in the podcast, and it's Palestine. They played against Australia about a month or two ago in a World Cup qualifier. And if I'm honest, Australia were very lucky to get out of there with 3 points. Palestine put up such a good defensive performance, such a good performance all around the park. And honestly, Australia threw everything at them and were lucky to get a 1-0 victory. They were just fantastic on that day. And I thought, geez, if Palestine could do this against an Australian squad that was red hot in form, what can they do in this tournament? They booked a couple of really good friendlies before the tournament against Uzbekistan and Saudi Arabia. So I think they're a squad. If UAE doesn't make it out of the group, it'll be Palestine. They've got some really good quality players, and they've got just, I don't know if the saying is in England, but there's a saying in Australia about people that they've got that dog in them. Palestine have that dog in them, for lack of a better term. They are just an absolute warrior side, and they are a side that I think anyone to get 3 points or even 1 point against them are going to have to fight really, really hard.
Don't know if it's an English phrase per se, but I've heard it before, and yeah, I absolutely love it. So yeah, best of luck, and I really hope we see that fight in them on the football pitch. But just a huge congratulations for them for even being submitting a team and entering the tournament.
Thank you very much for listening, and I sincerely hope that you enjoyed it. The second part of our 2023 AFC Asian Cup preview will be released on Thursday, January the 11th, which will be myself and Sha similarly previewing the second half of the tournament, which includes the likes of Japan, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, Thailand and Kyrgyzstan, whose manager and former Slovakia boss Stefan Tarkovic joins us to speak about his journey with the White Falcons, his experience gained from coaching at the past 2 European Championships, and his advice for Balnaz Almazbekov, an 18-year-old playing for Galatasaray who will become the youngest player at the tournament. Until then, goodbye for now.